Hello, Meoni here, and welcome back to another Tea Time with Meoni. This is a series where I get to sit down with you freeform and talk to you about all of the things on my mind, be that Final Fantasy XIV related, channel related, or otherwise interesting. And this time around, we decided that we were going to go with a community-focused episode with your comments. Now, a couple of days ago, I asked you all to leave a comment in my Old World flying discussion video and tell me what you thought about the prospect of flying in a Realm Reborn areas, so 2.0 areas, of Final Fantasy XIV, since it was announced in the 58th letter from a producer live the previous week that we're getting flying in 5.3, which to me is a big deal. Definitely come from left field, sort of out of nowhere for me personally. I didn't expect it due to the fact that they've talked about technical limitations in the past. And yeah, so I asked you what you thought. You knew what I thought because I made a video on it, but let's go through your thoughts and opinions. Now, there are 175 comments. There's no chance of me getting through all of those, so apologies if I don't get to your comment, but I'm sure you'll agree that, you know, you've contributed towards a quite interesting discussion, and there's some really good points floating around. So thank you kindly for taking part in that. So in no particular order, let's start with Marco Polo 3, who commented a day ago. They say, honestly, I think it's about time. I get why that person on your Discord said it and where he was coming from, but it's because of the great bulk of A Realm Reborn and the lack of flying that has me discouraged to even go through the leveling process normally. Honestly, I think it's a good change, and yes, while the flying will make everything feel small, I feel you can still look into the bright sides with it and won't be much of a hindrance. I do agree with them putting in a condition where they will have to go through the main storyline quest 1 to 50 first in order to get it. It's reasonable, and honestly, it's better than just giving it to everyone new and old at the start. So thank you kindly for your comment, first of all. So let's go through that. That's pretty much what I said in that video. We're in a complete agreement there, Marco Polo. The idea then, just to reiterate, I mentioned in that video, a friend of mine said it was a little bit unfair that there wasn't like any Aether points or anything like that to get attuned to, but essentially he felt that it was like giving it out for free, even though the prerequisites were there. So yeah, I think in many ways, the attunement of getting to 50 first is the best thing, because you're going to experience the zones one by one, like we did when we first played the game. If you're a new player, you're going to experience it the same. And yeah, I think it's fairer that way. If they did give it to everybody as soon as they logged in the game, new and old, it probably wouldn't feel right. Especially if you just started a game and you came out of Limsa straight into Summerford Farms and you just... Actually, you wouldn't be able to do that. Okay, so you got to level 15 and then suddenly you were able to fly away. I'm not sure how I would feel about that. It would feel a little bit... I don't know. As a new player, it's hard for me because I can't go back in time and experience it. But I'm sure it would disrupt the feel and the play of things. Maybe the zones would feel more laborious than they already do to me. I'm not sure. Anyway, good comment. Thank you kindly for that. So let's see. What else have we got? Kibogu comments, I had to suffer, so you should too. That's the quotes there. Is a mindset that I just can't understand. Why does it matter if it's easier for people than it was when you did it? It's progress. It's a good thing. You don't want to have to build your own house and poop in an outhouse, right? Or live in a cave and poop in the woods. Well, people had to do it before, so... should you, right? Okay. So that's a really strong way of putting it. I probably wouldn't put it as strong as that. But I agree and I disagree with you slightly. It's not that we had to suffer, so should you as well. It's more of the game design and the feel of the playthrough. Like I said before, it wouldn't really be the same if you just got flying as soon as you logged into the game, right? Imagine if they took away the My Little Chocobo questline, right, and didn't have any prerequisites whatsoever. So you got your mount as soon as you logged in. Like, I don't know, you start off in Limsa. As soon as you go to Summerford Farms, they're like, hey, here's a chocobo. Imagine, right? I know that's not what actually happens, but imagine that's what happened. And you're like, oh, okay. and it already had flying. So they gave you like a black chocobo straight away at Summerford Farms, yeah? You'd be like, okay, I didn't really earn that or do anything to get that. Now, the reason I say that before someone jumps down my throat is because flying in Final Fantasy, okay, look at any Final Fantasy game. It's not just based in this MMO universe, right? In any Final Fantasy game or any game in general, open world flying is something that takes time, right? You don't usually get this until the latter half of a game, when the world starts opening up, if we're talking about RPGs. If you're talking about the ability to fast travel between places, that doesn't unlock until much later. In pretty much any of those games that allows for fast travel back and forward, look at Final Fantasy VII Remake, for example. You know, chapter select unlocks once you've completed the game, so you can jump backwards and forwards through chapters you might have missed something in. In more open world games, the ability to fly on the Highwind, for example, or the Ragnarok, or whatever it is, whichever game you're playing, but not just in RPGs as well. In MMOs, it's the same. You show me an MMO where they give you flying from the bat. Actually, that was probably a terrible question because Ion Online exists, but it's still like a lead up to that, right? The main focus around that entire game was flight, right? Angel wings and stuff. That was the whole gimmick. But in every other game, getting to the point where you actually have the ability to fly, MMO-wise as well, usually takes quite some time. So that's why I say in that video, and why I stand by the point of saying, well, you should have to wait until much later on to be able to gain access to this, because otherwise it's going to feel like you didn't earn it. It's going to feel unusual, and the world is going to feel a lot smaller. And those are the reasons I said that, not because I had to suffer, so should you. Maybe I came across a little bit wrong in that previous video where I mentioned something like that. But, I mean, it is and it isn't that, isn't it? But for the most part, it is, because of the way that game design works. It's the flow, right? The pacing of something. If you didn't have to walk between fates in those areas, for example, before level 15, it would feel unusual, right? But probably less game-breaking than being able to just fly between them, which you can later on. It's something to look forward to, right? As soon as you hit level 50, that's even cooler, man. Like, imagine going, oh, right, well, I'm going to save the side quests, and I'm going to do them all once I unlock flying, and then being able to go back and do those. Or I want to go and do this fate chain, or it's more than anything, it's ease of use. Like, you get to 50, and perhaps you're one of these players, and I know a few of these, that start an MMO for the first time, and they go, you know, once I get to each of these caps before, like, an expansion originally came out, even though it's been many years since that expansion did come out, I'm going to work on the Poetic Skier, and I want to do Coil of Bahamut. For example, I was more recently watching Lobos Jr. on Twitch. I love that guy, by the way, on his Twitch streams. I love his Dark Souls content, etc. Absolute massive fan of his. I've been a subscriber for a while, on and off, you know, for a while. And yeah, he's been more recently anyway, over the past few months, playing through A Realm Reborn and then Heavensward and onwards. And he wants to play through the game because he played through every Final Fantasy game back to back so far, and he's finally got to 14, and he wants to go through it, which is massively, you know, exciting to see someone else's experiences for the first time. But at the same time, he's the sort of person who gets to level 50, for example, and then wanted to go and clear all of Coil of Bahamut. Not particularly on, like, the most difficult settings, you have to understand, but clear the raid content at the level he is, as synced as possible. I mean, I don't believe he did synced. I think he attempted synced and did a couple of turns, but then ended up doing it, you know, normally unsynced, so his 80 friends could help. But he still wanted that progression so that he got the experience of what the game felt like and how it changed between content. But not everyone's like that at the end of the day. Some people just want to get to endgame as fast as possible, and that's why a lot of the actual storyline changes are good as well. Much like Marco Polo said in their comment previously, a lot of the big hurdles for them was the inability to get past this wad of storyline that some of it's brilliant, right? But for the most part, the running around quests and handing in are kind of crap. And also hitting level 50 and getting flying is a lot more fun per se than having to go through lots of other quest lines. But at the same time, you know, you kind of get flying pretty early into Heavensward anyway, pretty much in Ishgard, right? So it's not too different, but the ability to retroactively fly in the older areas is quite fun. And it's going to help if you want to go back and do something, or you want to do a hunt mark and stuff like that. But yes, I digress. I'm repeating a little bit, but thank you for your comment anyway. But I don't think, if I did say I had to suffer, so should you, then I definitely didn't mean that in that context. More of, I believe that other people should have to experience the game the way it was designed to be, more of based on anything to do with me. Mostly for their own benefit, because otherwise the game would feel at fault without it. But that's my opinion, right? So let's see. Next comment, let's go to Zio or Zio, XIO. Sorry if I'm butchering names here. You know how bad I am with pronunciation. Somebody jumped down my neck in the previous video for the new Faye outfit. So yeah, I knew that was coming a mile away. So Zio says, or Zio, as someone relatively new to this game, welcome to the game first of all, it's baffling to see people upset about this. I honestly find it jarring to go from flying to ground locked when swapping between expansion zones and a Realm Reborn zones. Sure, it's going to make the Realm Reborn maps feel small, but they were already really small. And if they don't like that, they don't have to fly and break the illusion. Yeah, that is actually a good point, Zio. The point that it kind of is an option of yours, even if you had the flight to not press the spacebar or not click a button on your controller to actually fly. You can actually rebind this stuff so that you don't get flight on touching your spacebar, and you know, there's lots of other ways of getting around it. I suppose it does come down to a person by person thing. Perhaps instead of pushing on everyone, it's everyone will have their different ways of doing things. Yeah, the zones are pretty small, and they do make them, and it does make them, I would imagine, I mean, until we get our hands on it, feel much smaller. It basically, that opinion comes from playing lots of other games and you know, much later in the game as well. As soon as you get flying, for example, in a lot of the newer areas, those zones that look sprawling turn into quite small segments that you fly between or teleport between the Aetherites closest to where you're going, and then just fly to that destination. But I don't know. I suppose it is just an option at the end of the day. It's not a mandatory thing, although it's there if you want it. You say you find it jarring going from flying to ground locked and swapping between expansion zones. I can completely understand that to some regard, but at the same time, there's a reason, like I said in that other video, where essentially you have other reasons why you can't fly, right? Be that etheric instability or whatever game mechanic you want to explain with lore. That's the way they've done it. But it's the developer's way of saying, hey, we want you to attune to these places. And there's a good chance that between these ether currents, you'll be doing your quests, right? Some people will go out and straight away and do them, which is also why they've put some of the ether currents locked behind quests. So you complete this quest and it gives you an ether current. There's not one physically located on the map. It's actually locked behind a quest. Whereas there are lots of other ether currents you're supposed to use a compass and explore. Yeah, imagine crafting something as vibrant as an open world area, like a little map, and then putting all of these little set pieces and Easter eggs and different types of monster, and then the player just wanting to get A to Z, which is their ultimate goal. But it's the developer's job to distract them along the way and pad out a lot of that content to make it feel more expansive and give people more stuff to do, right? More people, I think, appreciate that after they've done it than they do at the time they're doing it. It feels like a bit of a slog going, oh my God, more ether currents. Really? This is the most painful thing ever. But once you get stuck into it and once you've done it, you're like, ooh, that ether current's over there. It's not that exciting, really, but it does give you a little bit of a kick when you go, okay, I've done all of those now. All I have to do is the MSQ now, and we'll have flying as soon as that last MSQ story for this zone's done, for example. And you do get a kick out of it. I mean, there are people I know that still haven't got flying in these zones because they absolutely hate ether currents, okay? And I have to ferry them around if we're doing treasure maps, for example. To me, I would ordinarily say, oh, you're being a bit lazy there. But at the same time, this could be like their fourth character, which is something I talked about in that video as well, is where I would like to see in the future achievements, progression shared between your entire account, much the way that some of the account-bound mounts work for all of your characters, right? So if you go on an alt on Sargatanus, you suddenly have access to the same mount as you would on Chaos Data Center because it's applied to your entire account. That should be the same thing, I think, with ether currents, where it's like, okay, let's just check this. Oh, look, you have a character that has earned this achievement. It's now a global achievement on your account. You've got a flag next to you. You don't have to do ether currents when you get to that zone. You can just, skip that point and just have to do the MSQ, or at least take away the open world ones for that character who has already done it before and just make them do those MSQ points until they get it naturally. That would be huge quality of life, but it's not how it is currently. So we have people who do like to play on different servers, role-play servers with friends on different countries. I mean, I've got characters on Tombury, on Sargatanus. I've got one on Balmung. I've got most characters on Chaos Data Center. I have a light character so that I can talk to fans over there because, the data center split in Europe sucks. And I need to have access to the other half of the community. We're already pretty small as it is, but they split us even further. And I'm still a bit peed off about that, to be honest, because we were the smallest population, and then they decided to split us in two. And there's no bridge between them. And it kind of hurts a little bit because there's a lot of people I know that are on light data center that I would love to hang out with more. But, until cross data center comes in, which we're hoping for in the future, I'm not going to be able to do that. But that aside, since we got a bit sidetracked, I personally don't feel it jarring. It's irritating for the first few seconds and you go, oh my goodness, this is the most annoying thing ever. And then you do it and then you get it out of the way and then it's done, right? And then you just do your MSQ stuff. I'm not the sort of person that does these as we go along, though. I'm the sort of person that clicks the ether current compass and then goes and does all of the compass locations I physically can do on the entire map, and then goes back to that quest that started in, the starting town of that zone. So it doesn't work the way that the developers want it to for people like myself, because we'll just go and explore anyway and do these ether currents, and then come back and do the MSQ from start to finish, because then it's much less jarring for me, right? I can enjoy the storyline as it flows. So I guess it's horses for courses. Different people do it in a different way. That's the way I do it. But I see your point, but at the same time, there is a reason they exist. And it's usually for the flow and development, because there's no other way of doing it, in my opinion. But very good point, regardless. There's no wrong or right answers today. Let's just be honest. These are opinions. These are not things. I'm shaking my hands in midair. These are not things. It's just something we can accept. Everybody is different. So let's move on to another comment. Thank you kindly for that one, however. We've got one from Reto. Okay, one day ago. They say, I think it's really exciting. I still consider myself a relatively new player. About level 62 on my main job. Congratulations. You're about to get to some really exciting storyline. Have fun with that. And it was always, though still enjoyable, just a bit tedious to need to break the habit of flying around any time I had to revisit a Realm Reborn areas, especially to level some alt jobs. There you go, you see. The little minigame of finding ether currents across the map was actually quite fun, like a sort of scavenger hunt. It was also a good chance to introduce the map more intimately before the player ends up just flying over all of it without really exploring it. it felt really rewarding to finally unlock flight in the area. Thank you, Reto. Hopefully you're enjoying your playthrough of the game. It's a fantastic experience. Otherwise, I wouldn't be making videos on it, of course. I wish you all the best of luck for that. To your points, though, that's really interesting and quite exciting to read. I suppose from a new player sort of perspective, everything is fresh and exciting regardless. And when you get to these things like Aether currents, they do seem a little bit interesting, a new way of doing things. I think that's the thing that we all forget. When we first play an MMO, like if we all played Final Fantasy XIV again tomorrow and we wiped everybody's brain completely clear with a big magnet or something, right? And the game already had all these expansions to work through in order, and we were, salivating at the mouth trying to get our teeth stuck into this stuff, and the servers opened and we went through this. Can you imagine the experience that this would have? Because you would see the ups and the downs and the changes in technology and the way that lip syncing works, and pretty much everything would be exciting, including Aether currents. They might seem like a little bit of an obstacle, but at the same time, like you've said, they do seem to be a little bit of a scavenger hunt. So as much as I've said before in my own experience, you come to these Aether currents and you're like, oh God, Aether currents, what am I going to do? And then when you get stuck into them, you kind of get used to them. They're fun in some regard. Hunting them down with a little compass, I think, is okay. You love it, which is amazing. Get used to that because you'll be doing it for another 2 expansions, probably more in the future. I doubt they'll drop it anytime soon. But yeah, you are completely right. It was a good choice. It was a good chance to introduce the map more intimately before the player ends up flying over it all. And that really nails it on the head, I think, of where they're coming from on a design perspective. Whereas you look at A Realm Reborn, and it was never meant to be seen from the air, right? That's the thing you have to remember. This was before they ever had flight in their peripherals. They never thought this would ever be a thing they would actually be able to do. But the success and obviously the currency that you get from selling a game of this standard and caliber allows you to do things like this. So I think it's really cool that they're coming back to do this again. But at the same time, they have to flesh out some of the boundaries like we've already talked about. They've done a lot of texture work behind the scenes to make it all look pretty. So I'm looking forward to seeing, how well that looks, because I've not gone and looked too deeply. And it's all going to look very different from the air. My only comparison to this is World of Warcraft, where we were able to fly for the first time in the base game areas finally. And a lot of I believe that was Cataclysm, right? Where we had all of those areas you couldn't get to previously. So all of those little forests and stuff, they looked completely trash from the air because of the texture differences. Because what they'd done is they'd fleshed out the areas below over time, and this bush needs to be high res and this tree needs to be this. But once you get above that, it started to look terrible. So they had to do a lot of rework for that. So maybe this is the first part of something akin to that. Like, you have to compare it to World of Warcraft, because that's the other game I know of. I don't know of any other game where they've had non-flying and then instigated flying in an old world zone before, other than WoW. So forgive me for comparing the two games. They're completely different, obviously, in many different ways. But yeah, now I think about it. So it's a lot of work, it's a lot of effort, and it's a lot of money on their part that they could be investing into something else, which I think that somebody actually had a point about. Well, let's just go through these. I've not vetted these comments. Arthrilis says, I think I'm in the minority. I don't mind being grounded in A Realm Reborn. It just feels right with how the zones were laid out. As for the A Realm Reborn grind, I also don't mind it because I enjoy the story and play the game for the story, and think that A Realm Reborn arc is a good story. Sure, Heavensward is much better, but I think all the A Realm Reborn world-building stuff is great as well. To prove I'm not just speaking as someone that's forgot the grind, my main has all classes level to 80, and I have one other character that's completed the main story, another that's at the start of Shadowbringers, one at the start of between Heavensward and Stormblood stuff, and another at the start of Heavensward. Then I have a character on a different server that's also completed A Realm Reborn. So yeah, I've done all of A Realm Reborn a few times. And then he adds, to add, if you roll a new character on a preferred server and get the Road to 70 bonus, you can be level 60 before you hit Heavensward, doing only main story quest and a few roulettes. Some good points there, Arthrillis. I don't think you're in a minority at all. I think there is a large group of people across the entire community that think it's fine the way it is. Some people like retroactively hate the idea of flying in these zones. I was kind of hoping I would get the opinion of somebody like that as I scroll down, but I might have to scroll a bit further to get to those comments. But yeah, the world building is wonderful back then. Apart from Prey Return to the Waking Sands. The back and forth there, that's not world building, that's just tedium. Personally, I think I suppose it is, right? At the same time, it's tedium, but it's building your association with Horizon and how lots of people teleport there instead of taking the Limsa ferry, which literally takes a quarter of the time. I mean, it has a loading screen, but it's a quarter of the time. Many people forget that it exists, but yeah, I mean, the world building is focused nice, especially around when you finally get to Mordona. The lead up to that is fantastic. Oh man, it makes me want to play through it again. And yeah, much like you, I have many characters that are working through Shadowbringers content right now, and you know, I've level boosted a couple of them simply to save time when I needed that character as high as possible then for a video. But some of them I've leveled up casually on the fly. It's been quite fun. But yeah, I don't think you're a minority at all. To go for your edited point where you edited your comment to add that if a new character is on a preferred server and the Road to 70 bonus, yeah, I mean, it's going to be crazy, isn't it? Even without that bonus, they say that they've reduced the quest by 13%, but they've increased the amount of experience. So presumably the increased experience is to outweigh the quest being taken out from the content. But they're guaranteeing that you will definitely be 50 by the time you finish the MSQ if you did no side quests. But if you had any buffs on at all, FC buffs, I mean, I suppose there's a few mobs to kill. Yeah, if you had FC buffs on, if you had a Road to 70 or whatever buff on a preferred realm, I mean, you're going to be probably 70, right? You're going to be like halfway through 60 before you actually hit Heavensward. Easily. Oh man, I kind of want to do a video when this whole thing comes out and go on a preferred realm and just record my adventures and sort of cut that down into little videos of me going, yep, this experience is nuts, and compare it to one without experience. Like you don't use any experience items and don't use a preferred realm and don't be in an FC and see what the comparison is. That might be a fun video. That sounds like a headache, personally. It really does sound like a headache. I'll think about that. I might do a video if I can be bothered. But wait and see. Some good points though. Let's see. Can I find somebody who is mostly against the idea? I mean, let's just go with whatever comment we find at this point. I could be here for hours. Taitaka, right? They say, I also feel that a reason they are adding this now is that it may be a lot more feasible for a couple of the developers to work on this rather than having to work on more weighted product additions. This is a lot easier, faster, simpler of an addition to the game and adds a lot of substance to the update for little manpower compared to, say, adding a whole new side quest, such as, say, starting work on Hildebrand equivalent quest lines, for example, especially during this time where staff working from home, where adding new content is a lot harder than tweaking existing content. So, good points. If it wasn't for the fact that this flight has been worked on, we believe, behind the scenes for a very long time. We saw the first iteration towards this with the barriers, which was way before the pandemic ever hit, when they were in full swing of production. A lot of the texture changes were already added to the game during that sort of cycle as well. So that it came along with that. So you had the mount flight barriers put in, that many of them speculated that it might be to do with flying, but some of us more leaned on the idea of bot preventative measures. But at the same time, they did add better resolution textures to the backgrounds in certain places and fixed a few things that you would really only be able to ever see from the air. A lot of the data mining community brought up a lot of interesting points where there's an entire pathway and a mountain and like an area of forest that couldn't be seen from the ground that was added essentially, which pointed further towards that. So I think for the most part, a lot of the 5.3 content will not be affected by the pandemic. Yes, they're doing a lot of QA currently from working at home, and they're not completely finished with the patch, but most of that will be polish. A lot of the development focus will have already been done before the pandemic struck, right? They admitted themselves they were, 70%? I can't remember. In the live letter video, I mentioned this, but it was something like they were 70 or 75% of the way through the patch being completed before the order to work from home came. So I think a lot of this stuff just needs polish, a little changes, maybe some omissions, maybe some stuff that was originally going to be in the 5.3 main patch is now going to be pushed to like a 0.5 patch or something. I mean, we did like in a live letter, they said all of the 5.3 series content. A lot of people don't realize that's not all coming in 5.3. That's coming in 5.31, 5.32, 5. Etc. So I would imagine a lot of the harder stuff will be pushed for that, and they'll just polish up what they have, because there's a lot of problems with working from home, the distractions they mentioned, and a lot of other things. You're right about being flying not quite as an intensive sort of feature to add to the game, but at the same time, it depends how much coding was needed. But a lot of that stuff's already been done, presumably, right? We're already at the point where they're polishing that stuff off. It's not like they're starting on the project from scratch right now at home. If they were doing that, I have no idea when 5.3 would come out, probably next Easter. But yeah, thank you kindly for your comment. Let's see, what else have we got here? Have we got another comment here? I'm really excited to find somebody that has a different opinion, and I'm not doing this deliberately. Well, let's just go with this one just briefly. IceFox28 backs that point up. He says, I noticed several patches back southern Fanalan edge of the map having more depth and interesting buildings far away that wasn't exactly there before in the distance. It made me more curious as to other places such as the swamps in East Shroud and the floating city of Nim, which ironically became a leap of faith area. People thought I was crazy when I mentioned it too. Imagine diving into the East Shroud swamps and seeing the cool things in there. So, unfortunately, we're not getting any underwater zones added to A Realm Reborn at this patch, right? So, underwater exploration of the A Realm Reborn zones, not a feature of this patch. Only flight around them. But obviously, to the usual flight barriers that exist. The map changes did look cool, and the other reason I was tricked into believing this was like nothing related to flying is because of Leap of Faith. When that Leap of Faith map came out, a lot of people were just, I mean, you could go and watch my video on the new Leap of Faith thing, right? I mentioned during that video, I was like, wow, look at the distance. They've really worked on these textures. They must have had to do it for this, otherwise people would notice all of the problems. Because you're actually in A Realm Reborn at that point. You're in the floating city of Nim. It is essentially just another instance version of the same map, right? Just in the air with this jumping puzzle rendered in. So you can see all around as you would normally in the game. So they up the textures for that stuff. You can see for miles from that Leap of Faith, like absolute miles. Obviously, those are just distant textures and they're not anything too detailed, but they really have fleshed them out, as you've said, which is one of the many reasons I thought that flying wasn't coming, because I was focusing on, oh, look, well, it's for Leap of Faith, isn't it? But yeah, I was wrong. It turns out flying is here, but there's a lot of things that added towards the idea, but it was very sneaky how they added Leap of Faith to sort of subvert that attention as well. Very, very fun. Let's see. Jazz Panda says, sorry, Meoni, gotta be that guy, but max ground mount speed makes ground travel equivalent to flying speed, not greater. Flying is going at max ground speed and can ignore geography like you mentioned, so it's faster by all measures. To your question, I like the change and enjoyed the video. Keep up the good work. Really? I thought that the mounted speed would only work on the ground, and your flight speed wasn't even relative to that. It was just relative to the normal normal ground speed without map inclusions. We did a video testing this as well, where we put it side by side with the footage, and as much as the flight can go across geography, making it overworld like faster, it's not in a direct line. If it was just a path, a straight flat path from A to B with no obstacles, it's quicker on the ground with the ground maps. Absolutely. But I guess, I don't know. Whatever. Let's move on. Let's go for another comment here. Ranger Smith, flying in a Realm Reborn zones will certainly be useful getting through 2.1 to 2.5 and for whatever off MSQ or Realm Reborn activities folks want to do. I'll use it for gathering at times, I imagine, and for simply avoiding using free teleport tickets, especially if we can fly between Vilbrand and Aldenard. Also, a Realm Reborn flying will be quite useful if it facilitates point-to-point movement in areas that are cumbersome to navigate on the ground, such as the Sylphlands, Burning Wall, etc. If Aether currents remain in place for all other zones, I don't see a problem awarding flying upon completion of 2.0 without achievement. Completely agree with all of those points. Yeah, I suppose like the Sylphland is just a nightmare, isn't it, really? Like the Burning Wall as well. Any quests that involve the Sylphs, including the dailies, are just painful to me personally. I was so happy when I completed the Sylphie Beast Tribe. I completed it more recently, actually, because I put it off for many years and realized that it would be probably a good idea to get the minions from all of these Beast Tribes. So I went back and did them at level 80. And it's, as much as you can melt all the mobs in front of you, it's so tedious. Like, there's like a branch that you can't get over and you have to go around like 4 minutes. I mean, that's an exaggeration, like 4 seconds this side and then around this looped area, and then through this bit of foliage, and then around here. It is pain infinitum, isn't it, really? But I can only imagine it was much worse at 50 for people who actually did bother to do the dailies. I didn't. Back then, I saw the daily quest and went, no thanks. There's no matter what reward you put in that, I refuse. Because I think I did the quest like once, and I couldn't stand it, man. I couldn't stand it. This was before I started doing like everything on the game in YouTube format. Before I actually changed my tune and put more effort into the game, basically. But yeah, the sight of that was just enough to turn me off completely. But this is going to make things a lot easier. So I would definitely advise people who are doing their beast tribes, I would just wait until 5.3, until you have flight, and then go and do them, like especially the ones in Fanalan, like on the Sagoli Desert. That place sucks as well, with the 2 areas that you can get through to the north and south area. Like going between fates for the a Realm Reborn relic in Fanalan is in the Sagoli Desert rather is one of the most unfun things I've done. Mostly because someone could go there and like blitz the mobs to pieces because of the fate scaling pretty poorly with item level. And if you start at one of the Aetherites, there's no way you're going to get there in time for that completion if there's like 1 or 2 people there already. So hopefully this does alleviate some of those issues, and it makes the game a little bit more fun to do the older content on, which I think is really the main focus of it, right? It's ease of use and the ability to enjoy the old world zones the way that they're supposed to be enjoyed in 2020. Dear. Let's see here. Let's go for one more comment, because I see that we're sat on 40 minutes. This is a very different way of me doing it. A lot more freeform. I'm literally scrolling through stuff here. This is very unprofessional, but you're going to have to deal with it. So let's end with Jacob Knudsen Oh my God. I had to end with somebody I can't pronounce. I am so sorry, Jacob. Jacob Knudsen. Right. Sorry. I'm very sorry. He says, I kind of hope they don't make things like Aether currents account bound. Here we go. Someone who's against that idea. Some might want to have the full experience when leveling their alt. And for those who simply are after the max level experience, there is always boosts. Stripping things out means they are gone for good. And it seriously isn't a very hard task to get Aether currents as you are going through the zone. Unless you forget and have to hunt them down all at once. Okay, interesting comment. And I see your point of view. But at the same time, I suppose, though, it is a part. Maybe have like a little text box that pops up and have the ability to skip it if you don't want. Would that make you happy? Or is that something you would want forced onto the players? Are you from the perspective more of that you want to do it? You want that so badly that you don't want them account bound for other people? I don't get the... I'm trying to find a way of arguing with a point that isn't just silly. I mean, stripping out things means they're gone for good. Yeah, but we're not talking about stripping them out. We're talking about the people who have gone through that stuff before. Give them an option of doing them or not. Maybe that's a better way of me putting it. Maybe having them account bound, but because you have that flag next to your character's ID that they give you the choice if you want to do the Aether current exploration or if you want to not. Similar as to how there's a skip button in, other games where you've done something. Like a good example, again, would be Final Fantasy VII Remake. Without spoiling anything, there is a section you can skip after your first playthrough that's quite lengthy. So when you come back to play through that section again on a subsequent playthrough, if you've already been tagged as completed it before, it does allow you to hold down a button and you can essentially skip that entire scene because obviously it's a tedious, quite, it's like half an hour section of a game. I can't explain it because it would be spoiler fuel that you can skip. So maybe something like that, maybe have like a little option. Hey, we noticed you're not a new adventurer. Would you like the Aether currents to disappear? Yes or no? Maybe that would be a better way of doing it. But at the same time, I'm still for the idea of account bound stuff. I'll be honest. Like the more stuff that's account bound, probably the better. And if people really want that first time experience, I don't know. I suppose they should have the option or not. Like I say, with like a box or something. But anyway, some interesting points in this video. I was desperately trying to find somebody who was very much the opposite opinion, that they hated flight in general, that they hated the idea of flying in a Realm Reborn. Those people do exist, but it's just complete coincidence that I scroll down today and I don't see amongst all of those comments that particular one. But I'm sure there is a comment somewhere in these comment sections that reads that way. It's just, as I'm doing this live, I haven't seen it. But rest assured that all opinions are exactly that. There's no right or wrong, like I say. We try to keep things constructive and fun. There's no name calling or throwing of insults in this comment section. So let's keep it fresh. Let's see what sort of comments you can come up with after today, whether you agree with some of the points mentioned from various people or if you completely disagree. But I'm very hyped personally for a Realm Reborn flight. This will probably be the last video we do on this until 5.3 comes out, and then we get to test it ourselves and see what all of the 2.0 changes look like. On paper, it looks like things are going to be way easier than before, but we'll have to wait and see, right? But I'm personally looking forward to going back and just flying around. I've done all of my Realm Reborn Beast Tribes, though, so if I'd known that flying was a guaranteed thing, I would have saved them. But I've already done them in this previous year, so that's what you get. That's what you get for waiting all of these years to do them and then just going, sod it, I'll do them. Only for the next couple of months for there to be the flight iteration added to those zones. I'm kind of kicking myself slightly there, but at the same time, I'm very excited. And you should be as well, because this means that they are retroactively going back and fixing things that people have got a problem with, especially from a new player perspective. It's nice to hear from a lot of you. Hopefully you're enjoying the game. Hopefully the videos on the channel are keeping you excited and informed. And yeah, thank you kindly for watching. Let me know below any of your suggestions for future topics, or anything in today's video that's got you interested in replying. We'll read through those off of camera. But thank you all once again for watching, and I'll see you all next time.